Welcome to Cybersecurity Sense, a weekly podcast providing updates and insight into the latest in cybersecurity. Brought to you by LBMC Information Security. Now, here's your host.
Hi, I'm Bill Dean, Senior Manager here at LBMC Information Security. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to discuss some new tools for PCI compliance. For the first time on the CyberSense podcast, we actually have a guest. There are many times that there may be a topic that I may be somewhat experienced, but I'm just not the best subject matter expert for that. And we have better people that are much more experienced with some of the things that we do than what I am. So with that, we have the expertise today of John Dorling in this episode. So John is one of our awesome QSAs here at LBMC Information Security and has agreed to join us to discuss some of the new tools for PCI compliance. John, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me today, Bill.
Sure. Well, first off, for our listeners that do not necessarily deal with PCI on a frequent basis, care to kind of tell us what PCI compliance is from a really high level before we dig into some of the details?
So on a high level, PCI compliance takes the form of an assessment, which is primarily a security and compliance assessment, which is required for all merchants who take credit cards as payments for whatever products or services they're selling. In order to meet PCI compliance, it may take on many different forms because there's so many different types of environments. And the forms may take place as a self-assessment for small businesses or may require a more in-depth assessment by an assessor approved by the PCI Council.
So I'm assuming the differences in the PCI compliance are based on how many cards or how many processes, or what differentiates a small business from that can maybe do some of the work themselves to someone that requires an outside firm?
The difference between the two is anybody who pretty much takes less than 6 million credit card transactions annually or less can usually do a self-assessment. Anything above 6 million transactions a year is going to require the services of an outside assessor.
Oh, thank you. As I mentioned, I know PCI somewhat. I did not know that exact number until you just told me. So that was a selfish question, and I appreciate you answering that. So, the topic of this podcast is there's some new tools from the PCI Council. So what are these tools and, where do they come from? How did they come about? Kind of give us some insight into that.
I'd be happy to. And this is really something that I was really excited to see, particularly since over the course of my career, I've had such an affinity for supporting small businesses. And that was the momentum for developing these new tools. The PCI Council has created these tools that were originally written for small businesses who struggle with trying to do PCI compliance. But one of the things that I found when these tools came out is that they were extremely valuable for much larger merchants who may be going through a PCI assessment for the very first time. It's one of those things where there's so many requirements, so many rules. The language itself is written such to be very technical. And basically what the PCI Council did was create these here tools to assist the small merchant or the new merchant coming into a PCI environment to help them get over that in basically plain English without all the tech talk.
So when you say a new merchant, you mean like, new to processing cards, or a new merchant requiring what we call a PCI ROC, in which they've gotten to maybe a level 2 merchant. Now they're moving into a level 1 in which they require the ROC that they're actually doing. Is that kind of what you're saying there?
It varies. And one of the things about PCI merchants is, for the most part, they are not in a static environment. Some PCI merchants get away for a relatively long time because the process of having a assessment done is driven by the acquiring bank, who they process their credit cards through. So if they don't notify them that an assessment is due, a merchant can get away for several years without having to do an assessment. It's once they turn around and get that greeting letter from their acquiring bank that now kicks in a process where they have to go and have an assessment done. And usually the acquiring bank will let them know whether or not it is going to be a self-assessment that's going to be required, or is it going to require the outside assessor to come in.
Oh, great. I really appreciate that clarification. So we've kind of touched on the fact that there's some new tools that are available, kind of touched on who may be able to benefit from them. But, let's go ahead and get into it. I mean, how can these tools really help some of the merchants that are trying to either obtain or, improve their PCI compliance?
Well, first of all, PCI compliance, when you look at it in its basic form, almost looks like a foreign language that is difficult for a lot of organizations that don't have dedicated internal IT or compliance staff to be able to turn around and meet all the requirements that are in the PCI DSS, which is the governing document for PCI assessment. So what the PCI Council has done is provided merchants a roadmap on how to achieve PCI compliance that is based on a type of payment system that is in their environment. But the key to that is that it's written in that non-technical terms, in that plain English format. So it's not dumbing it down. It is just putting it in terms that the general public can understand. And that's always been a challenge for PCI. It also provides graphical tools without those technical languages associated with performing the PCI assessments. Graphical tools, they say pictures are worth 1,000 words. The PCI DSS is, for all intents and purpose, 100% text. Now, these graphical tools basically lays out in very clear format all the different type of systems, all the different type of risk base that's associated, all the different types of security controls that organization can implement to help them become PCI compliance. And the other thing that it does is it puts you and your QSA, which is your qualified security assessor, on a level playing field. It allows you to speak the same language, not only from the standpoint of the terms that are involved in a PCI compliance assessment, but also in the terminology and the key concepts for achieving PCI compliance.
That's great. I mean, I really appreciate that. We've been teasing for the past 5.5, 6 minutes as to there's some great tools out there. They're really going to help all these vendors. Let's just get to it. I mean, what really are these tools specifically, and how are they going to help?
So there's a couple of documents that are available for download from the PCI Council website. And there's also some interactive documents that primarily allow you to go through somewhat of a self-assessment as to identifying the type of environment you have or the type of assessment that you need. So I'm just going to go through those real quickly. The first one is the Small Merchants Glossary for Payment and Information Security Terms. Now, what's important on that is the PCI Council has another document that is designed for technical people. It does technical speak. It brings in all those terms and concepts that were primarily designed for information security and compliance professionals. However, when you're dealing with a small merchant who doesn't have that IT team in place and the compliance people in place, they have no idea what those key terms and concepts are. The PCI Council basically took those terms and put them in plain English so just about anybody can understand them. The other thing that they came up with was a guide to safe payments. And this is a separate document that basically will turn around and help you understand your risk associated with taking credit cards. And it doesn't matter whether you're taking credit cards in person, taking credit cards as part of an e-commerce solution. It will help you identify those risks and provide you with the basic security that you need to help protect your business in the process of taking credit cards. And it also lists a number of resources for you that you can access to be able to help you get additional help for implementing a credit card system or securing your credit card system or meeting PCI compliance. Another tool that they came up with, and this is a great tool, and this is part of that interactive tool set, is the Small Merchants Common Payment Systems. And this guide here basically asks very specific questions on how you process credit cards, the type of systems that you have in place. It basically covers 14 different types of payment systems that are most common in PCI environment and basically gives you information on how to secure them. It's very graphical. It's very easy to understand. It gives you very basic network guidelines and very basic credit card data flows. But it also includes in each one of those 14 different common payment systems, it includes the risk, the threats, and what you need to protect those systems associated with each specific type of system. Because obviously, there's many different ways that you can implement a credit card system in your environment, and you need to, not one size fits all as far as the security and protection systems. One of the things that really needs to be conscious in a small merchant or a much larger merchant's repertoire is the fact that most merchants do not implement credit card processing in a single format. In many cases, they will have many different forms for taking credit card information, which may be what we refer to as a card present, where they're doing either a card swipe or what we call a dip when the credit card has a chip in it. It also may be taking credit card information over the phone. Or if you've got a e-commerce site where you're selling merchandise over the web. All of those represent different payment channels that would have a different form of an assessment being done. So when you look at those 14 different guidelines, you also have to keep in mind that you are looking at the maybe 2 or 3 that fit your environment and is going to have an impact on how that environment is assessed. And finally, the last thing that they have is questions to ask your vendors. And to me, this is probably one of the most valuable tool sets out there, because vendors have a tendency to want to sell a product. And not that they turn around and will tell you a fib, but they will turn around and try to paint their product as being more efficient, more successful, more compliant than what other products that are out there. So one of the requirements in a PCI assessment is definitely having control over your vendors and your service providers, making sure that they're PCI compliant, that they're doing products and services for you as far as credit card processing in a PCI compliant manner, and making sure that they maintain their compliance. So it gives you a complete set of questions to help guide you through differentiating which ones are compliant, which ones are not compliant, and how to ensure that they maintain their compliance.
Speaking of questions, well, I've got a question. I'm sure everyone listening has the same question. Where do we get our hands on this information? I mean, what are a couple of things that we can get enough information to kind of move forward with this? Sounds like it's a great add to the industry.
It is a wonderful add to the industry. Like I say, when the PCI Council first came out with this, I was extremely excited because they finally were addressing the needs of the small merchant in what I believe the first-time merchant for a PCI assessment. All this information is free. It is readily downloadable from the PCI Council's website, and you can reach that at www.pcisecuritystandards.org, PCI Security/small merchant tools.
Anything else? Just, where to get more information? If someone has questions, where else could they go?
Well, obviously they can reach out to their local QSA. I mean, the qualified security assessor is the most knowledgeable person about the PCI standards and what is going to be right for your environment. So certainly, by all means, if you have a QSA that you're dealing with, make sure that you reach out to them and have those conversations about your environment and what standards are going to need to be met and what type of reports in the whole 9 yards. Even if you're doing a self-assessment, a QSA can help assist you with what's right for your environment. The bank's going to tell you what type of assessment to do. QSA can pretty much tell you what's applicable for your environment.
That's great, Sean. And I really appreciate your time. I'm sure the listeners do also. I personally know that you're extremely busy. So for you to be able to do this podcast, I appreciate it. I'm sure everyone else appreciates it. One last thing to put you on the spot. So just give us 2 or 3 takeaways, just to kind of summarize what we've talked about over the past 15 minutes or so.
Well, the biggest thing is be informed about what your PCI reporting obligations are. The one who is going to turn around and set that for you isn't the QSA. It is going to be your acquiring bank. And the acquiring banks work directly with the credit card industry, with Visa, MasterCard, American Express. So what they ask you to do, they're going to forward up to the card brands and making sure that PCI compliance is being met. The other thing is download the small business tools from the PCI Council website. There's other tools, frequently asked questions, and other documents that will help you to understand the PCI environment even more. But definitely that small business tools will be the most valuable for not only small business, but the first-time merchants who have to meet PCI compliance.
Thank you, John, for that. And again, thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on. For the listeners, for more information related to PCI, The next podcast is scheduled. It's actually going to involve Brian Willis, which is one of our senior managers that leads a lot of our PCI engagements. And we also have a webinar coming up with Stuart Fay, which is Director of Technical Services, that obviously leads a lot of our PCI stuff. So the title of the webinar is actually What Makes Good PCI Segmentation and How to Audit for It. We'll definitely put the link in the show notes. It's actually on May 7th. Would love for you guys to join if possible. So in closing, really appreciate everyone listening. Tune in for our next guest interview, as I mentioned, with Brian Willis. As always, if you have a particular topic or subject that you'd like to hear on this podcast, please contact me at bdean@lbmcsecurity.com. To learn more about LBMC Security and the services we provide, obviously, please visit lbmcsecurity.com.